How one question is disrupting the sales industry forever. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Futurist Mindset Show. My name is Tessa, and I'm going to introduce you to your host, Reagan Rodriguez. Reagan is a futurist that teaches stratosphere wealthy legacy families how to become impact investors. Hi, Reagan.
Hello, Tessa. How are you doing on this afternoon?
I'm good. How are you? And our guest, how are you both?
I'm doing better
Doing
than I
well, doing
deserve.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll let Regan introduce our guest today, but I'm very curious about the answer to this question as well.
Yeah. Well, I've known Brent since I was like 26, 27 years old. So I've known him for, gosh, 23, 4 years, something like that. I'm now 49. And he has been quite the spiritual mentor to me and was somebody that also taught me a lot of things that I didn't know. Um, he has also been one of those friends that we have to thank God for people like this. That when you're kind of off course, he'll kind of call me out on things. And gosh, let's thank God for people like that in our lives, right, Brent?
Amen.
So yeah. And so there's times that Brent have said, you know what? I know that normally people wouldn't want to confront this, but I love you enough to do so. And so,
Mhm.
and actually, I'll tell a quick story before I introduce you on that. There was a time he used to lead a Bible study that I used to attend back when I lived in Ohio. And the question was, and I do want you to later get into time and time management because I think a lot
Mhm.
of people care, that's an issue. And there was a person in that group that said, well, I'm a person of integrity. And if someone wants to meet with me, I think this person worked in the mortgage industry. And again, this was 20 years ago, 23 years ago or so, Tessa. So back then, people were doing the refinancing,
Mhm,
right? If you
mhm.
remember back
Oh,
then.
yes.
And this person says, hey, if someone wants to meet with me, this person had said, I'm a person of integrity. So I'll drive all the way over there, even if it doesn't mean anything, and then drive back. And Brent said, well, that's not being a good steward of your time. And that wouldn't necessarily mean that you're a person of integrity just because you drive over to meet someone because they asked. And so then it got into an argument. And so then somebody decided that didn't attend the Bible study called me and they said, hey, Regan, I heard that there was what happened. So I tell them what happened, but my version might have been a little embellished. And so then later, Brent mentioned that following Friday, he says, I understand that there might have been a little gossip that took place based on what happened. And in a really good way, Brent said, for whoever it might have been that did that, let me remind you, in case you don't know, that gossip is sin. And I'm going, what are you talking about? I'm going, oh, all right. So again, you've always heard you don't reprimand somebody in public. So Brent didn't say something like, hey, because where he had these Bible studies was kind of like this conference room, and then his office was over there. So if he would have said, hey, Regan, after this, I need to see you in my office. Well, everybody would know he's the one that gossiped. And I don't know if you remember this, Brent, this is over
I
20 years ago. You did not do it that way. Instead, you said, hey, Regan, I have something in my office that needs to be lifted, and it's really heavy. Can you
Oh,
give me a hand? And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, I'm the guy, I'm strong, right? As soon
yeah.
as that door shuts, he's like, it's not that I need you to lift something heavy, it's that the conversation is going to be heavy.
oh,
And what do I
wow.
do?
Nice
Oh, it was
transition.
Oh.
really good. So he says, look, this is kind of what got back to me. And I'm like, well, no, that wasn't me. He's like, well, Regan, this kind of, no, I mean, I'm denying it.
Mm.
Again, Brent's really good. We finish up. He kind of shakes my hand and I kind of walk away and I didn't say anything. And then I get in the car and about an hour later, I thought, maybe I did. Maybe you might remember this, Brent. I send the email and I go, okay, maybe I did. And just a real quick email, Brent responds back and says, thanks for coming clean. And that was
Oh,
it. I mean, that we remain friends. So with all of that being said, Brent, why don't we answer the question that Tessa put in the
Yes.
subject line of
Yeah.
the
How
email? What is the
one
question? Remind me,
question.
Tessa.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about the question. How one question is disrupting the sales industry forever.
Yeah. So at that time, when that story that Reagan's talking about, at that time, I was actually studying the scriptures to form and write content for sales coaching and sales training and business growth. I happen to believe that the Bible is the best book ever written that can be applicable and practical for all aspects of life, even sales, right? And so if we think about sales, sales is historically taught in the world as something that you do to someone. That's the traditional methodology of selling. I am going to get up and I'm going to sell them something today. Okay, that's something I'm doing to somebody, right? Well, but when I read the scriptures, I read that selling is when two hearts come into agreement with one another.
Oh, yeah.
So we learn how to serve each other by serving from the heart to win the heart, or selling from the heart to win the heart, right? Okay, well, if you take that concept and then you add to it the fact that every salesperson in the world knows they're supposed to ask good questions, the problem is they've been taught many of the wrong questions to ask. Many of their questions are what I would call self-serving questions. But there is one question. So many years ago, I hired several of my children to read for me the scriptures. They each read a different version of the Bible: New American Standard, King James, NIV, ESV, and I had them read the four Gospels and record for me every question that came out of the mouth of Christ in a direct conversation. So for years, for like 20 some years now, I have studied those questions as it relates to building all of my sales curriculum. If you look at those questions, Jesus was not the softest person in the world. The questions that he asked were very penetrating. But if you take that and you wrap it around his heart of compassion, one question stands out. I call the greatest sales question in the world ever asked, right? It comes from the heart of Christ as a servant. It is found in John chapter 5. I'm actually writing a book on this as we speak. Okay, I've done teaching on this for 20 some years. The greatest sales question ever asked is from John chapter 5. Do you want to be healed?
Do you want to be well?
Yeah. Do you want to be made well? Do you want that problem to go away? I see that you have a problem. You've been living with the problem. Would you like that problem to go away? And we learn 5 deep characteristics about that one question. And then every question that Jesus asks fits into the model of those characteristics. It's crazy. When we look at it that way, it's really, really powerful. And I have utilized that question as the basis for sales coaching and training within my client base, right? And I have watched people's lives change. I have watched businesses grow. I have seen unbelievable things happen in the marketplace because of that one question.
And I've used that.
Yeah. And Reagan,
I've used it in an email, literally just by saying to someone, if I don't feel we're getting anywhere, I probably should have began that way. I'll say, do you want to be well? Question mark. And I remember the first time I'm like, here goes nothing. No, they will well, what do you mean by that? Well, I'm glad you asked.
Thanks for asking. Yeah. And if we tear that question apart a little bit, the wording for well or healed means complete. It means wholeness. It means fully saved and restored. That's the meaning of the wording that's there, right? So you're walking through the marketplace and you see somebody who has the problems that you get paid to solve, right? And you're good at solving those problems, and you can recognize that they have those problems. At some point in time, the servant has to have the humble courage to ask, do you want the problem to go away?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be fully and completely restored so that you have the ability to be successful and grow your business to the potential that's in it?
I love it.
One of the things that Brent does, he shared this with me years ago, that he said, Regan, when I read the Bible, he says, I read it with the lenses of sales. How can we apply this to sales? And at that time, I didn't know the Bible very well. I've learned it from Brent. And I said, Brent, I kind of do the same thing. When I read it from the area of finances. I said, so for example, there's this one verse that says, it's about Paul when he says, I've been shipwrecked, I've been stoned, I've been cold and naked. And then at the end, he says, and I count it all joy. I said, you know what that means, Brent? When it says count, I think that word count, what God is saying is that when bad things happen, counting, meaning you're counting $100 bills. So when he said, I counted all joy, he was referring to gold and silver. That's what I think that means. What do you think? And Brent said, let me tell you what I think. I think that we should read the Bible for what it's meant to be and not you interpreting it the way you want it to mean.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Over the years, Regan and I have had very, 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 a lot of conversations. We've had a lot of conversations. And one of the things that I said to Regan many times is, I wish I could adopt you as my son. I know that I have said that to him many, many, many times. So I've always appreciated him. Sometimes I tolerated him, but I loved him. I love him.
Yeah. I will admit, I don't think he loves me, but I don't think he likes me. I'm remembering a time. Yeah, no, it's true. You're right. He's not a friend. We'd say he's a mentor. You're right. I was thinking of another time that we, speaking of, talking about time management. I was saying that when you think of that word that we hear sometimes in sales, less is more. What comes to mind on that? How can you help somebody that maybe struggles with that? You've heard of talking your way out of the sale. You know me, I love details, and I'm such a detail person that sometimes I'll focus on the sizzle or instead of the steak, or the other way around. Is right. Sell the sizzle, not the steak. I think that sometimes I get into the details. Can you talk a little bit on that? Less is more, how we can apply that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So one of the things that I teach is the difference between what I call clock time and goal time. Clock time, all right, time is not something we control. Time is constant. Time is always ticking. The clock is always ticking, no matter whether we're trying to manage ourselves or manage it or do anything, right? But those people that perform at a high level in all areas of life work on what we call goal time, meaning they're not necessarily paying attention to the clock. They're paying attention to the effort that they put into their activities. So an example would be, how long does it take to play a baseball game? We don't know, because baseball is not governed by the clock, even though the networks have been trying to add a clock to baseball for years and years and years. So then you got to ask, how long does it take to get an out? I don't know. 1 pitch, 2 pitches, 3 pitches, 4. So baseball focuses on individual goal accomplishments to get finished. 3 outs for half an inning, 6 outs for a full inning. How long does it take to get an out? 1 pitch, 2 pitch, 3 fouls, 3 strikes, whatever it is, right? Those are all goals. They're all accomplishments. So if you think about that in terms of sales, then sales has more of a behavioral goal accomplishment focus than it does a time focus. And so if people understand the concept of less is more, then they can start putting in the correct behaviors, and it won't require as much time to execute those behaviors if we do them correctly from the beginning. Okay. An example would be what Regan's talking about. I feel a little bit of pressure on a sales call, so I'm going to start talking more. No, less is more. If you feel pressure, pause, come down, and lean forward to listen, not to speak. Less is more, because the time will settle down, and now we actually have the right behaviors, the right sales behaviors, quote unquote, listening involved versus speaking involved. When the salesperson is talking and running his or her mouth, they typically aren't asking the greatest sales question ever asked. Do you want that problem to go away? And so they can't listen to the heart of the prospect or the heart of the client because they're the one talking. Less is more. Back off of that and allow the environment to settle so that you can lean in and listen to the heart of the prospect.
Easy.
Tessa, did you want to ask a question in regards to that?
No. I was just saying we call them income producing activities. So I think it's very similar to the goal based. If you're focusing your time in on the things that actually make you money, as opposed to the things that just spin your wheels. So right. I love your comparison to baseball, though. It makes it a lot easier to understand why you have to have those small goals.
Well, I have a client right now who has, X amount of calls that he has a goal of making a certain amount of calls every day. But since he's been working with me, he's actually working on the goals inside of the number of calls that he's going to make. Like, I want to be able to ask 7 really good questions on every call. Mm. Right. So it's not about making 50 calls. It's about getting to the heart of the matter on every one of the calls that he makes. So instead of thinking, I got 50 calls I got to make today, no, I've got to ask 7 really good questions on every call that I make. If I make 10 calls and I ask 70 questions, I'm actually making more progress than everybody else on my team.
And I've seen Brent do this in action. I'll share a quick story that I read in a book. It had a lot of short stories. They were just one page. And one of them really was titled Less is More. Mm-hmm. And then I think I was young when I read that. I might have been 12, 13 years old at a library where I saw that. And then several years later in 2008, there was an event called Taking Back the Gates of Commerce. And I actually saw Brent do this in action. You don't know what I'm saying yet, but let me share what the story is. It's like a high school that has Army recruiters. And so during the lunch hour, there's the big auditorium and people came in and they had somebody from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And each one of them was going to get 15 minutes, right? Because it was an hour. And you each got 15 minutes to share why you should get in the Army, why Air Force, and then people will decide and go to each table. And so the guy in the Army said, look, I'm the first one there. They said 15 minutes. I'm going to throw in 17, maybe 18 minutes. And the extra 3 minutes I throw it will be the extra that someone will come. So then the guy in the Navy said, this son of a gun, put in another 3 minutes. I'm doing 5 minutes, right? So then we get to the Air Force, and that guy goes a little far. So next thing you know, the Marine is up and he only has 2 minutes left. And you think he would have sweat and said, what am I going to do? This isn't fair. And instead, he stood at the very end of the stage and just looked for 1 minute and 58 seconds. And he says, from the looks of this room, only 2 of you qualify. I'll be taking applications to the left of the stage. And everybody goes to the stage. And then the story says, less is more. So I don't know if you know the story about that you spoke at Taking Back Gates of Commerce. So there must have been, I don't know, over 1,000 people there. Do you know how many people were at that event?
Yeah, not that we had several of those events. I don't know exactly. I mean, we had a couple thousand at probably one event, maybe 700 at another event, 500 at another. We did them all different cities. Yeah.
the one that was somewhere in the, because you're right, you guys once did one in Fort Lauderdale, but this
Yep.
was in Ohio. The one that you guys did, was it in Mansfield, Ohio? Speaking of, where was it?
Actually, no, it was actually in Cedarville, Ohio. Cedarville.
That was the one.
Yep.
Okay. So Guy Deal and I rode together. This is a person's name. His real name is Guy, Tessa, and his last name is Deal. So when this guy ran for class president for high school, he says, I'm a good guy with a good deal. Vote for Guy Deal. Speaking of less is more. So he and I are together. We're
Catchy.
sitting next to each other in the auditorium, and there's this very well accomplished author. And he spoke and then said, if anyone wants to hear me, I'll be in room whatever, 110, because we were all going to break. Then another guy goes up and speaks. And then there's this other guy that was, I have to admit, a very good speaker. I mean, really good speaker. I won't mention the guy's name, but he did something with time management. And what he did was he went to the stage and kind of marched like he was going in circles, almost like a what's that, rat race?
Yeah, there you go.
And he says, "Stop slaving for Pharaoh." And again, the audience are mostly Christians. And again, I looked at it as thinking it's almost like the multi-level marketing thing. Do you want a vacation? Do you want to work less hours? Do you want to sleep in? I mean, who's going to say no to that, right? By nature, we're like, yeah. Well, I almost felt like he was saying that. He goes, you don't have to work. Don't be slaving for Pharaoh. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, oh gosh, this Brent hasn't gone up yet.
Kind of making me sick. It's kind of making me sick to my stomach right now.
Oh yeah, yeah. Do you remember?
I remember. Yeah.
He's saying, do you want to slave for Pharaoh? Well,
Yeah.
I'm going in there. I'm like, I want to go to that one as well. Well, Guy Deal whispers in my ear and he says, I don't think your boy Brent is going to get many people going to his room. And I said, I know. I really want to go to the one that's talking about stop slaving for Pharaoh and time management. But Brent's my boy. Maybe to be supportive, we should go in his room. And my friend Guy says, I don't know how Brent's going to pull this off. And I thought, he will. I know him. There's anything I know about Brent, he always lands on his feet. And the other thing I can tell you, he's got a competitive side. So his competitive comes out. It's now his turn to speak. And it was great. He said, well, so-and-so, first speaker says he's going to be talking about sales training. I will too. The other person says he's going to be talking about consulting. I'll be going over that. And then the last speaker said he talked about time management. I'm going to be combining all of those. And I'll be in room 115C. And then afterwards, I think you ended up having the biggest audience. But it reminded me of that. You didn't speak the most. I don't think you got that much time. But you weren't manipulative. You didn't lie. You said, I do consulting around all of that based on biblical principles that I have found.
Yeah.
So I've seen you do it in action. Go ahead.
There you go. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I remember that vividly. And the interesting thing, I think there were several hundred people in that room when I showed up to do my breakout session, right? So
yeah, you did. It was full.
It was full.
I wouldn't have been able to fit in.
Right.
Yeah.
Now the real question is, do you remember the gentleman in that room who started to out loud object to everything that I was saying? And he kept asking, how can this even be possible? How can this even be possible? I don't believe this is going to work, right? And it's
Was
it's
this
really
in front of everyone or in the group with you?
No, it was in front of everyone. Like he raised his hand in the group and said, I don't believe this is going to work. I don't think this is possible. I think you have to run numbers. I think it's all about numbers and blah, blah, whatever. And
I vaguely remember,
part of my actual session that drew so many people in is they literally watched me from the stage handle him and deal with him and have him literally back off and sit back down in his seat. I never broke stride. I never raised my voice. I just kept asking him questions.
The questions.
And the questions that I asked him are the same kind of salty sales questions that I teach other people, right, how to do. And I modeled the behavior that I want to see from my salespeople, from my clients. Like, so his name was Matt, by the way. So Matt, if I understand you correctly, this is your belief. And he would go, oh, right. And pretty soon he's like, I can't argue with him because he has just completely disarmed me. Right.
So listening and actually handling the situation calmly is what got you through and your questions.
Yeah, and yes, Tessa, and a lot of salespeople spend so much time writing this beautiful script, right? And they do this script and then they do something I call they show up and throw up. They show up with their script and they throw up all over the person in the room with them or on the phone with them, right? Which means they're way too scripted. If they understood in a deep way what it is that they actually brought to the marketplace and what problems they're really good at selling, they wouldn't need the script. They could speak from the heart about their courage and confidence in what they have to deliver. Jesus knew the entire Old Testament. He didn't have to speak from a script. He spoke from the heart because the Father gave him the assignment and the authority to interact with the people that he interacted with. So he always spoke from the heart, directly into the heart of the person who was hearing his message.
And Brent says a sale is a connection of the heart. So it says a sale doesn't take place until my heart connects with your heart. And you know what, Tessa, I was just thinking we're going to ask Brent a tough question that will help you in your business. And the reason why I was reminded that, there was this one time I remember I was dating this gal and her parents didn't like me. And so we were going to have dinner with her and them, and they were going to mention every reason why I wasn't a good fit for her. And so I call up Brent and I'm like, you won't even know how to handle this. I said, I even know what they're going to say. Or I think Brent said, well, what do you think they're going to say? They're going to say, I'm this, I'm that. I go, how do I handle that? And I thought I think I just stumped Brent. What am I going to do? And I kind of did. And Brent said, okay, you really think they're going to say all that about you? Yeah. Then just agree with everything they say. Going to say after that. So on that note, Tessa and I have been talking about, I think there was one time a few months ago, I was mentioning, I know when it was. It was right in January that I said, gosh, I'm off to a slow start. I haven't gotten any business. Then it's February and I'm like, things haven't been going so well. Mm-hmm. And Tessa said, look, I know how you feel because she mostly builds websites for people. And she said, I've been getting a lot of people that are saying, well, now because of AI, I don't need you. And then before, she doesn't just build websites, she does a funnel and they lead that person to a call of action.
Sure.
Well, nowadays, the objection she would get is, oh, well, because of AI, we'll do that. And so I said to Tessa, well, I guess you got to just go through more numbers, right? That would sow more seeds. And she goes, well, that's what I'm doing. So Brent, now that we have you, Tessa, since we're getting some free consulting here from Brent here. You don't know how much he normally charges. Sometimes when I'd ask him, years ago, I used to do that. I'd call him up and I'm like, I'm on my way. So what should I say? Reagan, I could tell you, but then I'd have to send you an invoice.
Right.
But he would still tell me. So we're going to get a free question here and let's hope he doesn't send us an invoice. So Tessa, what is an objection that you do get? What is one that you think can't be overcome? And let's see how Brent would handle it.
Well, I think that I don't know if it's a question, but they're expecting to pay less because they think now that AI can do all this, it should be less expensive for what they're going to get. So when a budget comes up or a conversation about the pricing, somebody that said, can you give me the better price than this? So I get that a lot now.
Yeah. Okay. So basically they're asking you, is there anything you can do with your price? Okay. There are three things. The truth is there are three things that you can do with your price. So your your response has to be in the form of a question. Sure. Would you like me to raise it, lower it, or keep it the same?
Love it. I love it. I can't imagine saying it though.
See, that's where the key is I'm a coach, right? More than a consultant or a trainer, I'm a coach. So I would work with my clients until they have the courage to say that. Because the reality of it is the person who is asking you, can you lower your price? You have to make the decision that they're not allowed to devalue.
Right.
This is your skill. This is your God-given skill. And if you're going to go to work as an act of worship to thank the Father for giving you this skill, then you have to hold the value of what you're bringing to the table. So when they say something about your price, I could say, is that your number one factor? Is that the thing that concerns you the most? So if I hear you correctly, you want me to lower my price. I would be happy to do that, but then I'll subcontract it out to my least talented person.
Oh, I like
right?
it.
So all those things become truths, but we have to, what I always coach is if somebody wants me to do something with my price, it always means they want me to lower it. But the reality of it is I'm going to ask them a question. You want me to raise it, lower it, or keep it the same?
I'm going to try it. I don't think they're going to say lower it. So they're
right.
going to say,
okay.
I'm looking for lowering it.
Yeah. And see, that's what I was afraid of, Tessa. So I just got to let you know that I have no plans of lowering my price. So does that mean our conversation or our potential relationship is over?
Oh, that's good.
Do you see his question is very like Jesus would say, do you want to be well?
Right.
Oh, you don't?
It's
okay,
like, you
fine.
want this expertise? I did actually. I do think I just don't have that boldness yet. I think I just need to have the boldness, like you said, to say it that way.
It's coming. So the reality of it is, let's say that they say what Reagan was talking about. Well, with AI now, it's so much easier to do all this, blah, 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 blah. So what you're saying to me is you want your website just to be average like all the other websites that AI is putting together. Because unless it has the human touch and you're really pouring your heart into it, AI is just going to give you all the averages of everything that it can find out there. It's not going to stand out. It's going to look like everybody else's.
I love it. That is perfect. Thank you. Well, thanks, Reagan, for asking and encouraging me to ask that question.
Yeah. So there's a whole line of coaching that's behind this, and that is every objection is either valid or invalid. So your job as the servant is to press in to find out the validity of the objection or the invalidity of the objection, and then deal with those so that you can verify the one and correct the other. If it's valid, it's valid. No problem. If it's invalid, I got to correct that.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a whole methodology I teach on how to get there. That's for another day. So.
Yeah. So as Brent does teach people to let's ask that tough question that you would normally be afraid of. And it reminded me here in Miami, there are so many of like personal trainers. And there's even Brent. That's why when there's so many of them, like a person I referred you to, I think it's almost like a multi-level. And so they tell people, here's the system. Now you go in and you recruit others. And there are also quite a bit of people that have been on that show, The Bachelor, that live here. And, Jimmy Kimmel makes a joke and says, why is it that they're either realtors or personal trainers?
Okay.
This joke. And he says, now, if they have the title of entrepreneur, ladies, here's what it means. They don't have a real job. So the personal trainers, and I know a guy like that one of the things he'll do is he'll approach people. So let's assume you're in line. He'll say, hey, I was on The Bachelor. Hey, I have all these, look at my body. Do you want to look like me? And that's his thing, is he says, how would you like to look like me? So I know a guy that I'm still friends with that is a personal trainer. And one day he was really honest with me and said, Reagan, I'm not doing well. and I'm not adding in new clients. And I said, well, what do you do? And he goes, well, I just tell them, look at me. How would you like to look at like me? And I said, okay, I get it. I mean, yeah, guy's got a great body. And so I said, you ought to talk to my friend Brent. And of course, this gentleman calls me right away and says, gosh, Brent asked me questions that I don't have the guts to ask, but I know they're the tough questions. Maybe you could, that may help some people as well. So let's assume someone was a personal trainer and that was their approach or whatever. You could look at it as that typical multi-level. Hey, do you want to make more money? It's kind of the same thing, right? It's that person, like you get the emails, Brent, that say, do you want these healthy products that'll change your life forever? Brent hates it when people do that. So if somebody said, what would be a better approach if you were a personal trainer than saying, hey, I could have you looking like me? What would be the tough question they should be asking that gets to the heart?
It's a great scenario. We have to back up a little bit and examine the true motivation of people, right? People are motivated by solving a problem or accomplishing a goal. Which one of those carries the highest level of motivation, however? The goal or the problem?
Problem.
The problem. So the personal trainer is throwing out to them a picture of the goal without addressing the most motivational part of the equation is what are the problems that you're trying to get rid of so that you can look like me? Because everybody wants to accomplish a goal, but they're dealing with the problems that are keeping them from accomplishing the goal. If they took their approach and pointed it towards the problem, they would find the motivation of the person much faster. And then, and then what they're doing is they're actually then digging into from a servant-hearted, compassionate standpoint of somebody who is actually caring about them resolving a problem. So now I'm going to start asking about the problem. So what are some of the problems that you're dealing with in your health, in your physique, in your emotions, in your mental well-being, right? And are any of those problems keeping you from accomplishing any of your goals? And if those problems went away, how much closer to your goal do you think you would be? And. But I'm going to go towards the problem, not towards the goal, because their motivation lies over there in solving the problem.
I love that because it really does get more to the true motivation, or as you would say, the heart. Because think about it.
The heart.
If I was just thinking, I know people that used to work out and they say to me, I need to get into it, but I haven't. And sometimes I get depressed in the morning. It would be a good way to start. Well, goodness, that would be a good way to start. Speaking of, is say, tell me about that. Well, I don't get started until 10 a.m. because I get depressed or I don't have much energy, but I used to. Well, that's a much better motivation than to say, hey, I can have you looking like me, like this guy would say.
Right. Because at the end of the day, the likelihood of me looking like him if I don't do anything, very small.
Yep.
Very, very small. And most humans will make a commitment towards a goal without ever getting started unless they're resolving a major problem to get to the goal. If I'm bleeding out of the back of my head, I'm not going to ask the doctor what's in it for me. I'm going to ask the doctor who I'm highly motivated, fix the hole in the back of my head, doc. I don't care how much it costs.
Yes. Well, I love that you said selling from the heart to win the heart. And that's really, I've seen that come through in your questions and what you've explained to us. And obviously you have more information on your website, but you actually have 2 websites. So I just wanted to take one quick second because you don't only do this, the coaching side.
I know people. He doesn't give shameless promotions like I do. I wanted him to do that. So let's get him.
I'm going to make him. I'm going to tell them where to go to get on your website, but then you also do retreats so that people can do this as a team, because it's hard as one, but it's even harder when you have a whole team trying to solve these problems together.
Yeah, correct. Yes, no, my wife and I live on a 32-acre property southeast of Columbus, Ohio, outside of Lancaster, Ohio, right? And we have a 3-story log cabin. We have a 3-car log cabin garage with a full apartment above it, and a fishing pond, and hiking trails, and camp bonfires, and a swimming pool. We have chickens. I mean, everything, right? And the idea is, I've been coaching people since 1984. I was a former football coach. I was an athlete. I coached football. I worked for a Division I football program for a couple years and got trained by a couple Hall of Fame football coaches, right? Stuff like that. And so I've coached football off and on my entire adult life. And one thing that I know about coaching, like if you're actually a real coach, is you know when to call a strategic timeout to refocus and revision and re-energize your team. Well, high-performing people in corporate America don't practice that very well. And I'm a coach. I'm a coach who believes there's potential in everybody that they may haven't even tapped into yet. And oftentimes that comes through the process of rest and rejuvenation and refreshment and revisioning and repurposing why I'm going to the marketplace in the first place, right? And so we bring people to our property. We bring couples, families, businesses to the property. I'm actually standing in my training room right now. This is my office. It's the old 2-car garage of an old log cabin that's been converted into a training room and an office. So I can put a bunch of people in my room, right? And I can give them 32 acres to explore while I'm teaching them how to grow their businesses.
Cool. So
and
cool. Well,
they're booked solid, aren't they? Like
we have bookings. Yeah. It's fun. It's a lot of work. We grow our own produce. We provide our own eggs. I'm because I'm a farm kid, right? And so we are looking into the possibility of building an outdoor kitchen in our shelter house. Our shelter house can seat somewhere between 75 to 90 people comfortably, right, under the roof. So we're looking at putting an outdoor kitchen in our shelter house, partnering with private chefs to bring private chefs in to work so that we can do nutrition for these people so they don't fall asleep in the afternoon when I'm doing a session.
You don't want anyone falling asleep on you're doing yours.
Yeah.
No.
You know, and I actually, a football team that I used to coach, they come in and they rent the whole property one day every year before they start training camp. And I take the whole team through a day-long team building set of activities as a former football coach who's now training and coaching in the marketplace, right? I don't want to say, I don't want to brag too much, right, Reagan? But I can tell you that the last 2 seasons, they have won their division and the championship. I don't think it has anything to do with me, by the way.
Well, it might be a big part of it, but you can find out more on the websites. There's 2, longonlife.com, and then there's Longhaven Retreat. Longhavenretreat.com. So go check out, because I think this is, it's amazing what you have to offer. And obviously we've seen the benefit of just sitting down and being able to talk to you and have you ask questions of us and learn what we need to ask of others. So thank you very much. Now,
one last thing before we wrap up, that I thought will be helpful to everybody. Before that, you were also saying, Brent, what was the last thing that you had just mentioned?
I don't even know.
Something else. All right, good.
It wasn't important.
No. The main thing that was important was, I remember when I first became a Christian, I thought to myself, oh, now I remember what I was going to say. The part that when you said that you're not a bragger, although Brent has played a really big part in mentoring, and I do listen to a lot. There's one thing I'm not going to listen to. I'm all about bragging. Okay. He's not. My attitude is, if you've done it, it's not bragging. Okay. Yeah. So that's the only part where I'm not going to listen to you on.
Well,
that,
you know what they say, in football though, right?
What?
When you score a touchdown, just act like you've been there before.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm good at doing. So on that note, it is similar what I wanted to wrap up with, that I think somebody watching this, whatever their spiritual walk is, if they're like me and they're competitive. So speaking of competitive, I made this error, and I thought when I first became a Christian, well, you know what? I probably should be a pastor because I thought, and that's probably ranked number one to God, and I want him to like me better than others. And if you're not a pastor, then you're like a second-class citizen. And Brent said to me, really, where does it say that in the Bible? And then I said, no, but they're viewed as better. He says, really? I thought the book I read says he has no respect to a person's, whether you're Billy Graham. I said, no, but it's, and then he says to me, was Jesus a priest or a rabbi? Do you see anywhere in the Bible where it says that? As a matter of fact, for the first 30 years, what did he do? He was in the marketplace making his carpentry and then selling it. Why? Because he knew that he could influence more people and talk to more people by being in the marketplace. And here's the point that I also learned from Brent that I said that I think I'd like you to talk on this because Tessa's good about serving her clients. Just like she did with me. I had something tech-wise that I was telling you was and she's like, I'll help you out. Let's get on a Zoom. Let's get on here. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how our work, whether we're farming, whether we're selling, whether we're helping somebody that is a little technology challenged, how that work can be a form of worship. And Brent has helped me doing that. That call, that email can be a form of worship. And actually what I've learned from Brent is not a form, it is.
It is.
Talk on that if we can wrap up with that, please.
Oh yeah, I could I could talk on this for days and days and days, but I'll let you two things real quick. I coached the football team 1 year, and I guaranteed this football team that if they came to practice as an act of worship and they gave everything they had at practice and they played the game of football as an act of worship, somebody was going to come from the stands and ask us about our king. 2 games into the season, we beat a team we had no business beating because they were better than us. We beat them 14-0. And a player on the opposing team literally says, maybe we should start praying to their God.
Wow.
And his mom comes out of the stands onto the football field in a huddle where we're having a post-game little prayer just together as a team. And she says to us, I want to know about this king that you play for. And I turned around and I said, his name is Jesus. Would you like to know? So that's an example.
It's great.
So the idea then is, if I have skill that is God-given, right? Am I then turning around and using that skill to glorify my Father in heaven? If so, that is an act of worship. Make sense? Okay. In the Old Testament, every use of the word skill, but maybe 3, is surrounded by, and the power of the Holy Spirit came upon Tessa and gave her skill with coding and building websites. The power of the Holy Spirit came upon Reagan and gave him skill with money and finances. And the power of the Holy Spirit came upon her and gave her skill with blues and purples and threads because somebody had to make Aaron's garment. And the power of the Holy Spirit came upon them and gave him skill with bronze, silvers, and golds because somebody had to make the ornaments for the temple. That is an act of work. Carrying out what God has gifted us to do is an act of worship. So if I go out as a servant today to help grow a business, I'm going out as an act of worship. I'm going to ask the Lord, who are you working on? Where are you working? Do they have a problem that I can help with? And if they do, give me the strength to help them grow their business. And when I do that to a level of excellence, I'm doing that as an act of worship. Now, back to Regan's question. I'm going to hold this up. This is in my office right now.
Oh, sorry. We lost your audio.
I'm just going to let you know
we
right
got
now.
his audio. Go ahead.
Pastors in the U.S. will interact with 8.8 million nominal Christians and non-Christian attendees per year with an average of 12 hours of influence with each. Christian business owners in the U.S. will interact with 118.1 million nominal Christians and non-Christian employees per year, with an average of 2,080 hours of influence each.
Wow.
Where's your influence?
That's a great question.
People in the marketplace have the ability to impact more people for the cause of Christ than pastors ever will.
I completely agree. Our business is our mission, our service, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
how
and so-
we serve God and
Correct.
we worship God. I love it.
Correct. So if I can understand that, then I am not a second-class citizen. I'm still a minister, but I'm not doing it from a stationary pulpit. My marketplace is my pulpit.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
Yeah. And then one last thing, speaking of how I began the conversation about coming clean, you know, when I've shared with you, Tessa, the acronym of salty sales, and I've showed you, and one day I did that and she's like, oh, these are really good scriptures. Do you remember that we did sales and it was salty?
Yes.
She's like, wow, this is really, go ahead. What?
Is that what he was talking about? Salty questions?
Yeah. Well, what I mean, what I really meant was when she's like, where did you come up with this stuff? Well, you know, what can I say? I learned it from Brent. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, it was
so
very
much
good.
So that he had even sent a newsletter about that. So I had read it. And then like a day or two later, you asked me. So I kind of cut and pasted part of that newsletter and said, let me show you my wisdom. But it was Brent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on today, Brent. It's great to get to know you, and thank you for your time and your wisdom. And then Reagan, also, thank you for hosting the shows and giving us such a variety of guests and information. We're here on Fridays at noon Eastern time. And if you guys want to hit the bell, you can get notifications and you'll find out when we go live. So have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you. Bye.